What's at stake in the September 14th recall? It's a matter of life and death. With Delta surging, Governor Newsom is protecting California, requiring vaccination for healthcare workers and school employees. Governor Newsom is fighting every day to ensure our state comes back stronger than ever. But on September 14th, Republicans are trying to seize power by recalling Newsom and undoing all his work protecting our communities. The leading Republican candidate promoted dangerous anti-vaccine conspiracy theories during the pandemic. And he'd eliminate all vaccine mandates on day one, which could force schools to close and threaten our recovery. That's why voting no on the recall is so important. Stop the spread. Return your ballot or vote in person by September 14th. Protect California by voting no on the Republican recall. Ad paid for by Stop the Republican Recall of Governor Newsom. Committee major funding by Reed Hastings and SEIU Local 15.
Timmons of Long Beach.
The summer sales event is going on right now at the all-new Timmons Subaru dealership, where you'll find a selection of new Subarus featuring amazing finance rates. 4 new 2021 Subaru models are now offering 0 APR financing. This is a limited time offer, so act now during Timmons Subaru Summer Sales Event.
Timmons of Long Beach.
TimmonsSubaru.com.
And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Mike Haas along with Christian Garrick, and welcome to a special training camp edition of Sports Talk. We're here with you from 3 o'clock till 6 o'clock. The Saints knew exactly what we were going to do, so they planned their practice from 3 to 5, just so Christian and I couldn't be out there. But we do have Jeff Nowak out there, and we'll be talking to him. He'll kind of debrief us. And again, happy to be here this afternoon. Flagship station. Jump in on the Oakland Heart Jewelers talk and text line 504-260-1870. Love to talk to you. And so we had practice last night at the Superdome, and I'm going to talk a lot about that today in many different ways. And so typical, they do it every year. They kind of get them used to the lights, get them used to the feeling, get them used to the turf. You know, it's a brand new turf every year. And, you know, Sean even mentioned last night, it felt a little spongy, you know, and so that's actually something they can adjust. But yeah, they can.
Okay.
They do.
So they roll it out a little bit?
Yeah, they'll add rubber and they do testing on it. It's to give you a certain number. It's called a bounce test, and they'll give you a certain number. And some coaches like it blank, some coaches like it whatever. Now this is only for right now because the field itself in 4 games it won't be an issue. But it's always every year is a brand new field, and so. You know, and I think it really got, there's a lot of new guys on this team who've never been in the building. So it gives them a chance, and they got a chance to see the renovations a little bit. And the referees were there, and it was, it wasn't full pads, but it was a good workout. They worked a lot, and you know this, they've worked a lot on 2-minute offense.
They typically do. It's a big focal point. Sean stresses it a lot, Mike, and, in particular, he feels like the games often come down to that 2 minute before the half, or 2 minutes certainly before the end of the game. And really, I think he places a lot of emphasis on points going into the locker room at halftime. I think you can stem the tide a little bit and see some momentum heading out of the locker room, especially if you're taking the opening kickoff of the third quarter of the second half. If you're receiving that, then, man, you get points, especially a touchdown going into the locker room and then a chance to go get a touchdown again. That's a 14-point swing. He focuses a ton on 2 minutes.
And it happened last week, not for the Saints, but Baltimore got a second field goal in the second quarter, and because the Saints won the toss, got the ball to start the third quarter. I don't think they did anything with it, but it's just that kind of mentality. You get those points, and then you come back out in the third quarter, and you get the ball right back.
One of the things about Sean's teams, they're always going to be prepared for situational football. He focuses a ton on situational stuff. He talks about it all the time. And it's situations, Mike, that the average fan might not think of. Throwing a ball out of the back of the end zone to take a safety because you don't want to get a field goal, a punt blocked, and then ultimately giving up a touchdown. Things like that he always instills in his team. Regardless of how talented they are, they're never going to be in a situation where they're not sure as what to do. Right. He focuses that much on those situations.
And it happened last night. Well, anyway, just in the 2-minute offense, you learn there are rules. You learn, a penalty at a certain point is not just a penalty. Sometimes 10-second runoff, yeah. And it's that kind of teaching. And I end that sentence purposely because this week, for whatever reason, and I haven't really seen him. I've been to every practice. I might have missed 4 since July 29th. I've never really seen him lose his temper. I've never really seen him raise his voice. But I saw this week more teaching, hand clapping. It was like a college coach, couple of practices. I saw more hands-on teaching this week than I have in a long time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. In particular, after the Ravens game with receivers, and he's obviously an offensive guy, so that's his jam. That's what he knows the best. But I remember the first practice back from Baltimore last week. He was with the receivers, and typically he's watching. He has a watchful eye on these drills, and he's bouncing around between offense and defense, or quarterbacks, receivers, running backs. But this past week he spent significant time with the receivers and instructing them, along with holding dummies and explaining to them. Basically, they're trying to remember when Taysom Hill threw the interception last week. Ty Montgomery was reading zone, and Taysom was reading man, and that's why the ball went over his head, because he was expecting him to keep running. So they ran through those scenarios where Sean would hold the dummy and then drop the dummy, and if he stayed up, then you hooked up. If he dropped the dummy, you kept running across the over. So that's a great point that you bring up, is that he seems like this past week was more involved, hands-on.
Right, and there's not many directions to go, but up when you kind of look at this offense post Baltimore. They had 12 possessions and 6 turnovers, 3 interceptions, equally divided amongst the quarterbacks, and 3 fumbles. And it wasn't really where, the number of the fumbles, but bad enough, but where they occurred. One was inside the 10, one was like at the 13, and then one was on your own, like 29 or 30. And so that's like 17 points, right? It could have been 2 touchdowns for the Saints, and the Ravens got 3 out of it. So it could have been 14, and then they would have gotten to 3. That's the game.
If that were a regular season game and they ended up coughing the ball up 6, or turning the ball over 6 times, they forced 2 of their own, so they would be -4, right? But -4 in the NFL typically gets you beat by 2 touchdowns. Right. Typically, at the very least. Sometimes even 17 or more points. And again, it was the preseason, 17-14. But to me, I think I'm willing to write off the fumbles, Mike, last week as a byproduct of them not having a whole lot of contact prior to that game. Ball carriers carrying the football without the benefit of really being thumped, or defenders putting pressure on those pressure points where you're holding the ball, et cetera. I think that gets cleaned up.
And this is exactly what Deuce said Saturday, is that a couple of instances where backs carrying it in the wrong hand. Just physically carrying the ball in the wrong arm, and maybe they had every intention to move it over as they were getting ready to get hit, but that's when they got hit, which goes back to your point, and that's when they coughed it up. So it's that, and I'm supposed to talk to Coach Payton tomorrow as we get ready for Monday, and that's what I wanted to talk about, is like how much. This is a tough question to ask, because how you got to word this very carefully. Sure. Because there's always emphasis on ball control, right?
Absolutely.
We get that. How much extra emphasis was it this week about fundamentals of ball carrying? Because that was a part of those fumbles last week. I'm curious to say if they did put – now, we watch practice so we can see it, but I mean beyond that, the meetings and stuff like that, the emphasis on that.
I'm sure – listen, if you know Sean, if you've covered this team, this organization long enough, you know that as much as he might portray that he's not happy, that they are unhappy, or say, I remember coming out of the game, he was like, there's some good things in this game that we can teach off of. And he's talking about some of those ball security issues, because he doesn't ever want a clean preseason game. In other words, he wants to be able to go to them and say, see, we still got a lot of work to do. We got to fix it. Even during the regular season, when they win, if they turn the ball over twice, those are the things that he's going to harp on. Or if they commit a couple of penalties, 8 penalties in a game, and they still win the game, he's going to, you won the game, but next time you're not going to be so lucky, because these 8 penalties are going to come back and haunt you.
Well, it's not been a problem. I looked it up. I forget what the numbers were. It was like 27 and 26. They're like dead even in preseason. Unlike, again, Baltimore, who's won 18 straight. That would be the worst, as a fan, that would be the worst thing that I would want, quite frankly. It's my team. Now, they've been good, so they've worked against it. But I never wanted the Saints to go 4-0 in preseason. To me, that was just a kiss of bad things that were going to come.
I'd rather them just not even play any preseason games, to be honest with you.
We did that last year.
Yeah, I'd be for it again this year. But
I already feel like 3 is immensely better. And I think the cut process is better. 5, then by the end, August 31st, they got to get to 53. And now you have 2 weeks, an open week. Think about that. There's a weekend off.
Yeah.
Between the Packers game. So you've got 2 weeks to take your 53 and really mold it into the team that you want. So, I'd be fine with 2 preseason games and still do that. But to me, just one game, automatically, it's so much better.
Well, I can tell you, not your predecessor and Zach Street, the predecessor before that, Jim Henderson, loathed the 4th preseason game. I mean, he dreaded it because it was all the
it's hard.
It was all the guys that weren't going to make the team,
but
and that was before. That was when they had to trim it all the way down from 90 to 53.
Big cuts. But I mean, so here's the question, and we don't know this yet. What is Game 3? What is Game 3? Because they've got 2 weeks off now.
It's going to be essentially Game 4.
You think?
I do.
Because they'll have.
Except for guys like David Onyemata.
They'll have 80 players. So they've got 80 players. So they have fewer than they would have had at this juncture between Game 3 and Game 4. But that's still not a lot to play. You got to play somebody. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see Kamara. You're not going to see the headliners.
No.
I think that you'll see David Onyemata a little bit more because he's facing that suspension.
Sure.
I think that there's a possibility you can see even guys like Ken Crawley who are fighting for that cornerback spot. But I think that they're going to keep that competition open between he and Paulson Adebo. Those are the 2 that I see right now fighting to play opposite of Marshawn Lattimore. So, yeah, that 3rd preseason game, I don't know. I don't know if it'll be exactly like what we traditionally saw in the 4th preseason game where it was just a mass dump of players that were not going to even be on the roster or not.
Oof, those were – I agree with my Hondo Henderson, those 4th preseason games, because I was on the field doing – the sidelines, and it was trying to get people, jacked up about that game.
Yeah.
So that was tough. All right, 3:19. Christian Garrick and I'll be with you all afternoon. We're going to be right back with the training camp edition, a special edition of Sports Talk. Mike Hoss with Saints Insider and our resident Marine, Christian Garrick, on WWLAMFM.com and the Odyssey app. Welcome back. Mike Hoss and Christian Garrick talking Saints football on a Saturday afternoon, a special edition of Training Camp, Sports Talk. The Saints are practicing as we speak at the training camp. I'm almost positive inside after practicing last night in the Superdome. And it was my first opportunity, although I've been in the press box 100 times, my first opportunity to be in the WWL radio booth with players on the field. I've been in the booth a lot the last 2 weeks. And holy cow. I mean,
you're up there in the rafters.
I was just like, I can't see anybody's numbers. What am I, like the first 10 minutes, I was just sat there in stunned silence going, what am I going to do? So you started using the binoculars, and a lot of guys in practice, they roll up their jerseys. It's not perfect, and they're still 85. And so I talked to Zach after the game. I was like, I got to find Zach. After practice. And he's like, don't worry about it. I had my binoculars, and you'll kind of learn a pattern of binoculars and what you have to use and to kind of get used to it. And this, when you get in the regular season, you're down to really 45, game day. And 45 to me seems like, we can fit those people in this room.
Well, maybe I should retract my argument that I want them to not play preseason games. Maybe I want them to play preseason games so you can get these things worked out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. For your benefit, let's have a couple more preseason games.
Heck yeah. So he says you'll start to learn what certain players look like by the pads they wear or the stuff they wear on their arms. It gets easier. But wow. And because when I was in sports, we were still at the 300 level.
Yeah,
we were in
all suite territory.
All suites,
now.
Right? And we had the best seats in the house, much like Baltimore. Baltimore was great, and so it's. I will say this because I'm not bemoaning the situation, but you have an automatic great view of the play setting up. When they break the huddle, it's no question of how many wide are going right and how many are going left. You can see it so clearly because of the vantage point looking down, and how the play breaks up and works out. That's a great advantage. It's just trying to figure out who's in that play.
Yeah, you'll get it though. I'm certain of that, man. I'm not concerned about that. I've been up there. Look, it's I've called high school games up there.
Wow.
All right, and high school players are smaller than these pro players.
Smaller numbers.
Yeah, so that's a challenge too. But you'll get it, I'm sure.
So the Saints made a couple of roster moves. You may or may not have heard. They did sign a kicker. Earlier this week, somebody asked, are you going to sign a kicker? Asked Coach Payton.
Yeah.
He goes, no, I think we'll just, we'll go for it all the time. Go for two and just go for it all the time. I mean, he was kind of saying it jokingly, but then yesterday was Friday, and I'm like,
we got a game on Monday.
They still haven't signed anybody, but they did. They signed Aldrich Rosas, who actually played with Jacksonville last year, 6 games, 8 of 11 on field goals, 9 for 9 for extra points. Most of his time was with the Giants. Made the Pro Bowl in 2018. Made 32 of 33 field goals in 2018, and in 2019. Only 12 of 17, but certainly, they didn't.
See, he had a run-in off the field that I think soured the Giants. Yeah, DUI, suspicion of DUI. So, I think that's where his time in New York kind of soured. He's a Pro Bowl kicker. He's got skins on the wall in this league.
Again, it's not a long-term thing, but, you get him in, you get somebody. Now, he's wearing number 6. He's wearing Morstead's old number that I think 6 people have worn already this game.
Yeah, Prince Mukamara and others.
Been a few.
Alvin Kamara as
and
a
then
joke.
Didn't Maher wear it as well?
Yes.
So, might make a change there if you can. But other than that, and then they signed a safety, Jeff Heath. Signed him. He played most of his time in Dallas, 7 years with the Cowboys, and then last year with the Las Vegas Raiders.
He led the Raiders in interceptions.
Yeah, 3 interceptions, played in 13 games, 5 starts, and 3 interceptions. By the way, the 3 interceptions was a career high for him. Mm-hmm. So I don't have the game book, but I went through the stats. I did not see him show up in the Saints game, the second game of the season, so I don't know if he played special teams or what his deal was, but didn't make an impact that I could find. But certainly looking, this team always just looking and trying to find, it's the secondary. Who's that guy? And this is a safety, but still, you just got to get better.
More so this year than any other years, and at least in the last handful, where 14, 15, and 16, they were churning over the bottom, 4 or 5 on that roster, seemingly every other week in camp and even during the regular season at times. But that 17, 18, 19, 20 run where they had so much depth, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to turn over the roster at the back end very often because they knew there were very limited roster spots to be had on those teams when they were going to the playoffs year in and year out and potentially making it or having a Super Bowl caliber roster. And it's not the same this year. So they have the luxury, and I think that they have the obligation to constantly look to, hey, can I improve the bottom half, the bottom third of the Saints roster? And I think if you're general manager Mickey Loomis and you're in a pro scouting personnel department, you're always, Michael Parrington, you're always trying to find that guy. Kevin White is a player that I would reference, right? You just brought him in, the wide receiver from the Bears, former first-round draft pick, 7th overall. I think that it has the potential to be an absolute brilliant move because if he works out, you got him for very little, and he has a chance to be dynamic in this offense. And then if Mike Thomas returns, all of a sudden you have an answer to who's the number 2 to Michael Thomas. And that's not taking anything away from Marquez Callaway.
I was going to say, I feel like that job's been anointed.
2 and 2A, 2A and 2B. I guess my point is that all of a sudden with the addition of Kevin White, if it works out, you went from thin at receiving to you get Michael Thomas back, and along with Marquez Callaway, now you got some depth, some pretty good depth at that.
Now, if I had asked you 7 days ago, 7 or 8 days ago, tell me about the Mike Thomas situation, right? It was a question you guys asked me last week. And then after what happened Saturday, at least for me, and the Saints sat down with him, they seemed to clear the air. He was on the sidelines. He was joking, catching balls in a boot. Like, to me, that situation could have gone Aaron Rodgers on us, right? But they seem to have done the right thing. It felt different.
Yeah, and look, I think they were headed towards a divorce. Like it was divorce was imminent.
Irreconcilable differences.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, one party says, "Hey, let's try therapy first. Let's go to some counseling, and maybe they come to an agreement, mend some fences." And look, the bottom line is that the Saints are a better football team with Mike Thomas.
Oh my gosh,
they just are.
Yes.
And as much as you might be perturbed as an organization that he put off his foot surgery, his ankle surgery, and ultimately what I would call a selfish move, you still got to recognize that he is a tremendous weapon. And whoever your quarterback's going to be, whether it's Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, having number 13 to throw the football to makes those guys, one of those guys, or both of those guys better.
Oh my gosh, this team, what do we always talk about? That this team, Bobby and everybody, it's playmakers.
Yeah.
You need playmakers.
In
and
particular.
especially early, if for whatever reason, and I don't know when this happens, that we keep talking about Marshawn Lattimore and Deontay Harris, and maybe the longer it goes, the better that they can be around early until you get guys like Onyemata and Mike Thomas back. But yeah, it's playmakers. And then we talked about bringing in Jeff Heath and Kevin White. They brought in, that was the other day, they brought in Natrell Jamerson, cornerback.
A former draft pick of theirs.
Yeah, Brian Mills. So they're, it's you can see when they bring him in, where they're bringing him in and where they want to get better. But areas that we initially were talking about, like linebacker, man, Quan Alexander to me looks like he's just svelte, hungry,
Achilles
quick. Unbelievable.
He doesn't look like a guy that's
no
rehabbed.
way. No way.
He doesn't look like a guy that had his season cut short because of an Achilles tear last year. And that's what's interesting, Mike, is man, the advancements of modern medicine. That Achilles injury used to be career enders for skill guys and guys that can run like Quan can. Dan Marino, we saw him go through, but he was never really fleet of foot. And as a quarterback, you could still drop back and pass. You remember now, if you watch Dan Marino closely after his Achilles injury, he limped all the time. He was gimpy dropping back and passing. But to see Quan Alexander move the way he's moving is unreal to me. It just goes to show you how much better condition these athletes are in these days, how much better these doctors are at repairing these kinds of injuries that used to be, a year and a half, 2-year timetable to recover and get back on the field. It's incredible.
No, I agree. Watching him work is like I'm almost like whoa, but back off, slow down a little bit, Right, it's not Packers. Take it easy. Come in slow. Come in slow. So they had to get down to 85. So when they signed the kicker Rosas and Heath, they cut the tight end Josh Peterson. So this is really the second or third team he's been with this camp. So that's tough for him. And they put Tommy Lee Lewis on reserved injured. So that is how they got to stay at 85, which is where they'll be, assuming nothing changes today, tomorrow, or Monday.
Tommy Lee.
Yeah.
He's on injured reserve, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for him. That's actually a good spot that he landed there for him, selfishly, because he's gonna stay on the roster. He's not gonna get cut. Now they could injury settlement him later on in camp and bring him back, perhaps. But that's a move that you go, all right. He's not 100% healthy. Let's go ahead and stash him. And if something happens later in the season to one of your skill guys, a return guy, then you can always recall him. What I'm interested to see, Mike, here Monday and going forward, who's going to replace Justin Hardy as the gunner? All right, who's going to replace that guy? I think we've brought up so many questions with this team. Cornerback opposite of Marshawn Lattimore. For a while, it was the D-line, which I think is actually going to be pretty okay. The linebacking core looks better now that Quan Alexander is back in the mix. But to me, it's about their special teams. They've been so good for so long in the kick coverage game, and a lot of it had to do with Justin Hardy's ability to get down there on kicks. Are they going to find that guy? And the answer to that is we don't know yet.
Well, you're not going to find that guy. Trust me.
True.
Justin Hardy is the one guy for the last 3 years, not COVID year, I was on the sidelines, and he was the one guy, whether he was as a gunner or jammer, I would find. For not one, because I wanted to watch him because he's an amazing athlete, and two, that I would get the heck out of his way because he is a beast. He could care less about
Fearless.
me, anybody. He was, and so that guy with that mentality is not there. So you got to figure out. And then when you look up and down the roster and you see like they're doing Aesop Winston out there, they're trying some DBs out there, but they're also using those guys as possible return guys if you don't have Deontay. And I don't mean you don't have Deontay from the DUI. That we don't know what's going to happen there, but at some point we're not putting Kamara back there, right? And so Deontay has looked so strong this camp to me as a receiver that I don't know that, is he a guy you want to put back
yes.
there?
He's too dynamic.
Too dynamic?
He's too dynamic. He can change the game. I mean, he averages over 14 yards a return. Yeah. That's a first down. So that's one less first down you have to get as an offense. He's too dynamic to not put back there. He can flip the field. He can change the score of a game. I understand what you're getting at in terms of he could be such a valuable offensive weapon as well. But I think that they're going to do a nice little dance in terms of the amount of snaps he gets. I think there's a sweet spot somewhere offensively of how many snaps he gets. But he's their primary returner. But they have to prepare to be without him because of the suspension that's looming, because of his offseason alleged DUI. And also, look, let's face it, injuries happen in this game, and you got to be able to have a contingency plan should he go down with an injury.
But you're right. Trying to find that person, Justin Hardy, tough. But and the special teams, the bar is so high, but you're looking at a new holder in Blake Gillikin, and that's an assumption that he wins the punting job. And he was with them last year.
He's going to win that job.
He's going to win that job. And so a new gunner, a new jammer. You have two, of course, but there's one that's your stud, right? Yeah. So new kicker, for a while. I mean, so this specialty, new returner if Deontay gets suspended. Like, well, wait a minute. So, you got Zach Wood, who never misses a snap ever. But other than that, you're looking at a complete kind of redo from a unit that was, like you say, started you with a first down, and conversely kept the other teams. Their punt return was 2.3 yards. So
that's one less first down you got to stop.
That's a big area, and those are we seldom in this day and time sit here and talk about gunners and jammers, but Hardy was so good at that and doing it, you kind of took it for granted, and so to replace that. With what these guys, because it's a unique skill. You got to be fast and big, but not too big that you're not, that you're not. You got to get through people and have some speed. That's a unique skill set.
Yeah, it's a fine line as to what that's going to look like in terms of the player. You got to be mentally a little off, I think, to play that position as well.
You got to be, yeah.
You got to be a little irregular.
You got to not care about your body. And Justin Hardy, that was my point. He didn't care about his body, so I know he didn't care about mine. I would pick which sensation I would go hide behind when he was running the ball.
Mike, you're ducking behind the sensations? Come on.
Well, I would protect them
first.
Gentleman. I would protect them first, and then get behind them. Do whatever I have to do. All right, we're just getting started. Again, you got questions? We're talking Saints. They're practicing right now. We're going to hear from Jeff Nowak, we hope, later in the afternoon about how things go. But get in the game. Give us a call here on the Oakland Heart Jewelers talking text line, 504-260-1870. Mike Haas with Christian Garrick, talking Saints football on WWL. Welcome back. Mike Haas and Christian Garrick talking black and gold football on WWL. Saints fans, join us on the Oakland Heart Jewelers talking text line, 504-260-1870. And, we've got a call right now. Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Raymond joins us. How you doing, Raymond?
What's up, Raymond? We got Raymond on.
Raymond, I got you. I can hear you now. They let me run the board, and they should never let me run the board. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just pushing buttons over here, Raymond.
I got you, brother. Look, I'm calling, man. I see this year, you guys been Saints fans and fanatics and, reporters and all this for a long, long time. And to me, it seemed like y'all have the Saints jumping off the cliff this year. I actually think it's going to be more in line like they were when Drew Brees first came there and nobody knew what to expect. I think y'all looking at it as, without Drew, the going to flop. And I think the defense has stepped up the last few years. And if they can continue playing at the level they was playing the last few years, I think Jameson, Taysom, going to surprise some teams. And I actually think Jameson is going to start, and Taysom is going to have his role that he had the last 2-3 years.
Raymond, Jameis and Taysom have done nothing. Either one of them have done nothing to out and out say, "Hey, I'm the guy." Like it's not obvious either. No one's standing out. Now, to address what you said about perhaps we're a little cynical. You're suggesting that we're cynical about this team this year. Well, here's what I would tell you. If you look across the NFL, the teams that year in and year out make the playoffs, it's because stability. Look at the Saints. They made the playoffs 4 straight years because they didn't have a lot of turnover. They kept their quarterback. They kept their core players. They kept their head coach. Now, they have their head coach. They're going to have a new quarterback. They have several new faces on the defensive side of the football. They have a lot of new faces at the skill position. They don't have Mike Thomas. David Onyemata's facing a 6-game suspension. Deontay Harris is going to miss some time with a suspension. Marshawn Lattimore is expected to miss some time.
It's a long list, brother.
So Raymond, pardon us if we are a little bit skeptical, but I think it's justified when you start looking at, oh, by the way, Will Lutz, you don't have him either due to an injury for a few weeks. So there's a lot of turnover right now. There's a lot of things that are not stable on this roster. Things that there are players on this roster that are no longer here. Or that are, I'm sorry, there are no longer players on this roster that have been here for a while and proven themselves in a Saints uniform. There's some talent on this roster. I think Mike and I will both agree with that there is talent on this roster. We just don't know what kind of talent yet at key spots.
But I will say this, Raymond. I agree with you in one aspect, in that we don't know, right? Just like 06. We didn't know. We didn't know anything. We didn't know, even at the time, what a great draft class that was. Unbelievable. And so I do believe that the unknown of this football team for the first time in 15 years will benefit them. I do think they love being under the radar. I do think that Coach Payton loves being told, you're not going to do anything this year. I think they love it. And so the question then becomes, to me, are we looking at a 13-3 team, 12-4? Really, I'm sorry, 13-4 team or 12-5? No, I don't think so. Are we looking at a playoff team? Yes, that's been my thought. You don't just suddenly, even though as great as Drew was, you don't just suddenly turn terrible, right? Now they've had a lot other holes right now besides Drew, but I still believe this is a playoff team. Now, what's that? 10-7? Probably. You're gonna have to go 10-7. I think it's hard to say. I mean, look at the NFC. I mean, the AFC North last year. What was it? 12-4, 11-5, 11-5. Right.
Listen, Mike, I'm gonna double down on my on Raymond's claim that I'm a little bit too negative. I rattled off all those new names, right? All those players that are not available. Injuries haven't even hit yet. You're not 6 games into the season and guys are banged up. So what does that look like then? One of the great things about this Saints organization over the last 4 years was, man, they had depth. A ton of it. Guys that were starters on other teams, guys that could start on other teams. You don't have that. Not at the level that you had it the last 4 years. You have it along the offensive line. You have some good quality depth there. You can't say the same at other positions on this roster. At cornerback, you lose Janoris Jenkins. You lose defensive lineman Sheldon Rankins, Malcolm Brown. You lose Trey Hendrickson in free agency. Look, those are real things. Those are productive players.
But we'll see, Raymond. I appreciate the phone call, and I want to be clear out, because I think Raymond really wasn't speaking too much of us. I think he just felt overall in the media, and I think that's probably an accurate statement. So appreciate the phone call from Raymond. We'll see. Nobody knows, man. That's the beauty. We don't know. Nobody knows. Let's play some games.
Quote more. You think you know.
That's right.
You think you know.
But
you really don't know. And you never will.
We'll be right back with this training camp edition of Sports Talk Mike Hoss with Saints Insider and our resident Marine, Christian Garrick, on WWLAMFM.com and the Odyssey app. Back, Mike Hoss and Christian Garrick. Don't give us a call right now, because we're going to talk for a couple of minutes and we're going to have a break and a news break. And so on the back end, give us a call, but do so at 260-1870. We'll, it's open line Saturday. The Saints are practicing as we speak. getting ready for Jacksonville Monday night, 7 o'clock, first game ever in the Caesars Superdome. And also, fans, the ability for full capacity for the first time since 2019, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it would have been a 2020 playoff game, technically. So, it's a lot to look forward to. We'll see how everything goes. Then it's a short week. We go from a real long week to a Monday night game, Saturday night game in Arizona, and then that'll be it. And so I'm interested, Jacksonville lost their first game to Cleveland. I'm interested just to kind of see,
Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Trevor Etienne. I'm just interested.
Yeah, me too.
I wonder if Coach Payton or how much of the other the Saints coaches will just out of curiosity just watch this guy. What is he like?
Yeah. Look, first off, what I'm fascinated by is, and Sean gives you a peek at it every once in a while. Down the road, they might end up signing a player that they had draft grades on, right? So I'm not saying it's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence, but I'm sure that they had a draft grade and a draft scouting report on Trevor Lawrence. And Sean's told this story before. I talked about this unique part of it is when you're facing a guy both in a regular season or the preseason that you've had a draft grade on, it gives you a way to affirm some of those ideas or thoughts you had about a player through the draft process, or it gives you the opportunity, we were wrong about that. He does this better than we anticipated, and they go back and they can correct it. So it's a constant evaluation
confirmation
process. Yeah, and I think that part of it's neat. I'm with you though. Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick. Travis Etienne, former running back at Clemson from Louisiana. There's going to be some big time names in this game, and potentially the future at quarterback in Trevor Lawrence if he's as good as everybody thinks he's going to be.
And I would think, I don't know this, I apologize, but it's just Saturday. The relationship between Urban, even though college, because Florida and Ohio State. I mean, you look at this Saints roster, I imagine that relationship is pretty strong.
Between he and Sean, you better believe it. You better believe it. Look, he's drafted a number of those guys, right, out of Ohio State. And look, I think that he wanted to practice. I think the Saints wanted to practice against Jacksonville, against the Jags. They wanted to have him down here this week. It just didn't work out. But yeah, there's definitely a relationship. Really, where that relationship is maintained is there is a, and I might get myself in trouble here, but whatever. There is a scout that works for Ohio State that I know the Saints are very, very they trust his talent evaluation. So it's a good source to lean on.
Well, we'll see. Monday Night Football. It's always interesting. So we'll talk a lot more about this in the 4 o'clock hour. The quarterback situation. Jameis is going to start, which we kind of knew.
Sure.
Sean's been very 50-50, pretty open about it. Very transparent, and that Taysom would start when he told us Taysom started game 1, that we probably will flip it in game 2. And so expect to see Jameis start, and how many series really kind of depends, I think, on how he does. Even though Taysom didn't have a great 3 series. He moved the ball, got 4 for 4 on first downs, and then had the turnover, and you kind of felt like, all right, it was the end of the first quarter, and so it ended up, Jameis got 5 drives, and then I think we'll probably. I still want to. If this were my team, I still want to see some Ian Book Monday. I want to see some Ian Book for a third quarter, maybe Trevor Siemian fourth quarter to give him some time. But I want to see more of Ian Book just out of curiosity.
I'm with you, and I think he needs it. He's a young, developing quarterback, and you do need to see what you have in Trevor Siemian. But don't
you think you know?
You do know a little bit.
Who I think, by the way,
he started 24 games.
It is
NFL.
what it is, but he throws the ball so well. His mechanics are so good. You look at him, you go, "How? I don't." He's just,
He's a fourth-string quarterback on this roster. I mean,
right.
A lot of teams would love to have him as their number 2.
Right. You get labeled as a journeyman, but I'm telling you, when we watch that guy throw, he has a great motion. Trevor Siemian, we'll talk more quarterbacks in the next hour. We'll also take your phone calls, 504-260-1870. Mike Austin, Christian Garrick. Stay with us. We're talking Saints football on WWL.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives. There is so much out there that we need to understand. But for every threat, there are heroes working at the edges of science and policy to protect us. I'm Dr. Abdul El Sayed, former Detroit Health Director and host of Crooked Media's America Dissected. Every episode, I talk to the doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders who are working out new ways to protect us against our biggest threats. New episodes of America Dissected every Tuesday. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
On Pod Save the World, we want to be your cheat sheet for global events. My name is Tommy Vitor, and each week, my co-host Ben Rhodes and I break down the biggest stories from around the world. Ben and I both worked on President Obama's national security staff, and we'll introduce you to the activists, politicians, and journalists who can help us understand what's going on around the world, what it means for the United States, and what it's like being inside the White House Situation Room during a crisis. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods.
What's at stake in the September 14th recall? It's a matter of life and death. With Delta surging, Governor Newsom is protecting California, requiring vaccination for healthcare workers and school employees. Governor Newsom is fighting every day to ensure our state comes back stronger than ever. But on September 14th, Republicans are trying to seize power by recalling Newsom and undoing all his work protecting our communities. The leading Republican candidate promoted dangerous anti-vaccine conspiracy theories during the pandemic. And he'd eliminate all vaccine mandates on day one, which could force schools to close and threaten our recovery. That's why voting no on the recall is so important. Stop the spread. Return your ballot or vote in person by September 14th. Protect California by voting no on the Republican recall. Ad paid for by Stop the Republican Recall of Governor Newsom. Committee major funding by Reed Hastings and SEIU Local 15.